So the scanner allows you to get input from the user from the command prompt, and we can look at that too. I can go there and run it from here. It's going to be where it builds it, probably, right? Classes. Okay. Alright, so it built that one there. But first, I'm going to put this on the side for now, and we'll come back to it. I can go ahead. Is there a preference as to whether to import or not? My general rule of thumb is that if it's something I'm going to be using several times in the program, I'll import it. But if it's a one-time thing, then I generally won't. So there's not a lot of benefit in importing it. But if I was planning on using this scanner in all over the place in a larger program, then it does make sense to import it. Okay, so let's go ahead and run this. So it's prompting me to enter a value. So if I enter 40, now I get radius of 40 is some larger number. So I get that there. Now I could have gone to the command prompt and run this myself by saying Java and then it'll prompt me here. For a number, and I enter 45 this time, and now I get that, the radius. So in NetBeans, what I'm simply doing is I'm going to where it's building these classes, and just going there. Okay, so any questions on the scanner? The scanner gets input from the command prompt. The scanner, by the way, is rarely used. Java is not really meant to be a character user interface. So if we were to go back to the world of user interfaces, the original user interfaces were character user interfaces. And the user interfaces that replaced them were called the graphical user interface, which is essentially what Windows and the Macintosh are. And Java can do graphical user interfaces as well. We'll see how to do that a little bit later. And then after that, the graphical user interfaces, which are still around and very popular, we had the web user interfaces, which are probably the dominant user interface today, is the web user interface, doing input and output over the web. And Java can do that as well. So Java is a very versatile language. And now, of course, we've got all the mobile phone and devices and all the different types of devices and tablets. And Java can do those interfaces as well, so it's a very versatile language. But we're starting with the basics. The original user interface was a character user interface, and that looked, something like that. And I think I've got one example that is pretty good. And we'll look at it, I think, next week. Let me see what the schedule is. Well, we have to do a little more before I can show you that. Okay, so since next week, Thursday, which, by the way, I have a little of an announcement on Thursday. I'm actually getting minor surgery on Thursday. I will be home, and I'm hoping alert enough to actually do the webinar. I may be doing it from my bed, but I still intend to do it. Just to give you a heads up, if I'm not there, it could be because the anesthesia is lasting longer than I thought. It's very simple same-day surgery, so I expect that I will be able to do the webinar. I'm not going to be able to walk because of where the surgery is, but I will be able to sit and do the webinar. So, but just to give you a heads up, if I'm a little late, or I'm just not there altogether, we'll make it up. We have a couple of days makeup days. The way I'm figuring out the syllabus at this point, the midterm can be done online. It doesn't need to take up a class slot. And I've got some other ones here where I don't really have stuff filled in. So we've got a little bit of leeway if for some reason I'm not able to teach on Thursday. But I'm hoping to teach. Anyway, when we get to selections, and I usually like to cover selections and loops in the same lecture. So I'll see. Maybe it'll be next week. Maybe we'll do part of half of chapter 3 and then finish it with chapter 4 next week. But then I'll give you an idea. Once you have all that, we'll have enough information to show you how to create a very simple character user interface. Okay. Back to this, though. Okay, so that's what we did there. The scanner created essentially a link to the computer's console and the keyboard and all that. The printout was just a prompt to tell him to enter something. And then let's go over here. I think it's a little bit better. The radius equals input dot next double means, okay, so this input is essentially an object, what we call an object, that now has a link to the computer's keyboard and console and all that. So when we say input dot next double is essentially saying get the next double that's entered at the keyboard and store it in here. Basically what that's saying. The rest of the program's the same. It's making the calculation and it's printing it out. So the rest is really the same. Any questions on that one so far? Okay, so identifiers. Basically is a variable. An identifier and a variable are the same thing. And again, you probably have some understanding what a variable is from math, because basic algebra uses variables. A equals 2, B equals C, B equals 3, C equals A plus B. Well, then C equals 5, right? So same sort of idea. In math, we use a very simple one-letter variable, and early programming languages used just a single letter variable as well. And the problem is they ran out. There's 26 letters in the alphabet, and large programs simply just ran out. They needed more than that, so they expanded it. So now a variable can be any number of characters. It has to start with a letter or an underscore or a dollar sign, but then it can contain digits as well. And it's simply a name for a value you're going to store. Today we would generally say that we would create a variable that stores what we expect to be there. For example, we plan to store the radius. The value that was going to be entered is the radius. We're prompting them for the radius, so we stored in a variable called radius. Now I could have called this A. I could have said A right there, and then A there, and A there, and A there, and it would have worked just fine. But it's considered more readable to create variables that represent what they are. So it's radius and area. So that's why we use longer variable names. And you can create a variable that can be anything. There are some reserved words that you cannot use for an identifier. You can't use the word true, false, or null, as those are special data elements, so they cannot be used. You got some examples with variables. Radius, again, is a variable. Area was a variable. So these are all variables. Declaring a variable. So we saw how to declare the radius as a double. A double is a large number. It is a number that can have, I think it's in the trillions or billions or something like that. It's a very large number, maximum number. We've got a chart with the exact length. And a double can have a floating point, so you can represent dollars and cents, for example, in a double. Int is a numeric data type 2, but it's half the size of a double because it can only store whole numbers. So it can store any whole number variable value, but it cannot store fractions. So you would only use it if you know the number being entered is a whole number. Like what floor do you want to go to? Well, you don't go to the 6.5 floor, I don't think. But anyway, so that's that. And it's more efficient to use only an int if that's all you need. It uses less of the computer's memory. Even though the computer's got 4 gigabytes, still large enough programs, if they run a lot with other programs, will eventually bite into that memory. And a char is a single character. A, B, C, D, E. We'll see how a char really works a little bit later on. Assigning it, you assign it a lot like you would assign a variable in math. X equals 1 or A equals 1. B equals 2. A could be equal to the letter A or the letter B or any letter, for that matter. There's actually two things that are going on here. We're declaring the variable here, and then we're giving it a value. So this is called declaring, the part to the left, and initializing it with a value on the right. They're actually two different things, and you can do them together on one line, or you can do them separately. It doesn't really matter. Something called a constant is simply a variable that is read-only. And this makes sense from a memory perspective as well, because it will save memory if it's something that's not going to change. So, for example, pi is always 3.14159. It's not going to change. And you don't want someone to accidentally change it, so you make it read-only. And that's what the final does. So the final modifier, we would say, before the data type is making it read-only. And a lot of times you do that. There's actually a lot of memory considerations for why you would do that. It's actually more efficient on memory to tell the computer this thing's read-only, because then it kind of sticks it in an area of the memory where read-only memory is accessed more efficiently. Talked about naming conventions already. Choose meaningful and descriptive naming conventions. And it's just, you should choose a variable that makes sense, so that if you're storing someone's last name in a variable, you should call it last name. It would not be a syntax error, it would be a runtime error. If you declared something an integer and then but the user entered a floating point number, it would be what they call a runtime error, because you're trying to put data. It's like you're trying to put a square into a round hole. It doesn't work. So a syntax error is caught by the compiler, and the compiler has no idea what you're going to put in at runtime. So it's not a syntax error; it'd be a runtime error. So what this is saying, that if you start with lowercase, and if the name consists of multiple words, concat them using lowercase for the first word and capitalize the first letter of everything after that. So, for example, if I wanted to create a variable, char and first initial, that's 2 words. So the first is the first word, and it's all lowercase. And then the first letter of each word after that would be uppercase, just the first letter. And that would be a standard naming convention for storing, the first initial of someone's name. Any questions on any of that so far?